Welcome to an exceptional edition of Rebellion's educational series. We're here with an Army intelligence officer, Michael Pregent, who has worked with Petraeus, former Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki, has been in places we would be too petrified to even step foot out of the airplane at. Michael, thank you so much for coming on. And now you're a fellow at Hudson, of course, the renowned think tank.
Yes, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thank you for your service to this country, by the way.
Thank you.
So Afghanistan, how did we leave without the 10 to 15,000 US civilians in Kabul?
Yeah, this goes beyond any planning failure. This is a failure of, I mean, you can see that the question stumps me. I can't believe it happened. Our military can't believe that this has happened.
Well, do you think it was based on the model of Saigon, where it took 2 years for the North to take out the South, and so they figured, okay, 3 to 6 months, and we'll get them out over that time?
I think we had shrunk our footprint so much in Afghanistan that we really didn't know what was happening. We had shrunk our footprint down to such a small size that we no longer had the ability to get out and see what was happening across the country. And as we started hearing reports that the Taliban was taking a province or taking the capital or moving in and gaining strength, we tried to corroborate that with traditional intel, and we couldn't do it. So because we couldn't do it, we told ourselves it didn't exist, that the threat didn't exist. But if we're an Afghan soldier in that province, 2 years ago, there was an American next to you. 3 years ago, there was an American in a battalion next to you, a US battalion. 4 years ago, there was an American and a brigade next to you. The last year, there's been no one next to you. You're by yourself. You have to call in the Americans. It takes time to get there. So trust is built on frequency and proximity. The more you see me, the more you trust me. The more you can reach out and grab me, the more you trust me. The Afghan soldier wasn't able to grab that American or see that American in some time. What they were able to see is the Taliban. They were able to hear the Taliban's threats as well. And the Taliban has always said, the Americans will leave and we will still be here and we will remember what you did. So if you're an Afghan soldier, you will fight if the Americans are next to you. When the Americans are no longer next to you and they're leaving and they're exiting and you no longer have air support, you no longer have logistical support, you are no longer getting intelligence, you're sitting there and you're not going anywhere. You have to stay in this country. So you fight and you get killed, or you shed the uniform and you blend in, because that's the only way to survive. We gave the Afghan soldier that choice. Fight and be killed without US backup, or survive.
What about the vice president's region, the little holdout area? Is there much of a prayer there, or not?
Well, yeah, but will they trust us? I mean, they're there, right? So this is traditionally what happens. This is why we were able to get into Afghanistan to begin with. We had the Northern Alliance basically occupying territory. We came in with CIA operatives and special forces operatives and realized, holy shit, we have a great force here. Is it okay to cuss on this thing? Sorry. Yeah, we have an incredible force here that can take on the Taliban. So why don't we start using this? And that's how it began. That's what we fell in on in 2001. That force, after 20 years, was cultivated into the Afghan Special Operations Forces, the Afghan Commandos. Those fighters were trained over 20 years by US special operators to become killers, to go out and get Al-Qaeda high-value targets and Taliban high-value targets. They are the first people on the list to be killed by the Taliban.
Yeah.
They are the ones that they are going out and killing outside of Kabul. They are killing.
Michael, so many questions here. I've got to jump back to something else quickly. The airport, I've been getting a lot of questions about the safe passage that the State Department says the Taliban has granted through August 31st. Do you believe that safe passage exists? One, and two, CBS has reported that there have already been beheadings at certain Taliban checkpoints.
Yes, so I don't believe that at all. This administration believes somehow that the Taliban are TSA screeners. They're going to look at passports and papers, and if you have them, they're going to let you through. The Taliban is not a monolithic group. Each Taliban cell has their own agenda. So if you get through one Taliban checkpoint, They may demand a bribe. They may demand payment. They may turn you away. Well, let's say you get through that checkpoint. You still have to get through 2 to 3, maybe even up to 10 more checkpoints before you get to that airport. Each one of those checkpoints hasn't coordinated. They're not on the same page. They do whatever they want. And if you are an American that was born in Afghanistan, you are not going to make it through those checkpoints. It's not going to happen. Even if you pay that first bribe at that first checkpoint and give them $100,000 to get through, the next checkpoint is going to demand payment. If you don't have it, you're going to be killed. And that's why our Afghan Americans and our Afghan SIV personnel are terrified to show their paperwork to the Taliban, because they believe at that point they'll be taken away, beaten, tortured, and killed. And this is pathetic that our Secretary of Defense said yesterday that we don't have the capability to expand the cordon to go out and get Americans.
Why don't we?
Kabul. We do. He's a SecDef. You can deploy more troops. That's why he's not going to do it. He would have to deploy more troops. Probably another 10,000 troops would have to go in to augment the 6,000 on the ground now to secure a corridor, to secure a cordon to get our Americans out. And you know what? That's exactly what we should do.
Well, of course we should do it. The Mossad, one of the most respected intelligence agencies around the world, was built by Golda Meir to rescue any Jew who was in danger around the world. Just an individual Jew would get rescued. Yet we have 10 to 15,000 Americans, the wealthiest country in the world, and we can't send people in to rescue these Americans.
Right. And you've heard some of the caveated language. Well, we told them they needed to make their way to the airport two weeks ago, and they didn't do it. Well, maybe they believed what Biden was saying, that this wasn't going to happen. Maybe they believed what Secretary Austin was saying, or General Milley. But to your point, the Israelis do it. The Brits are doing it now. The French are doing it now with their citizens.
How are the Brits doing it? Tell us about that.
They're leaving the airfield, they're going out, and they're getting their people, and they're coming back in.
Okay.
We're not doing that. And we should be doing that. Hopefully our special operators are doing that. Hopefully our agency is doing it, and we're just not saying anything about it. But I don't see it happening, because you don't see the level of confidence. You don't see that look of confidence in General Milley's eyes or Austin's eyes that they got this taken care of. They know what they need to do. They were stumped yesterday by questions in that briefing. The question that derailed them was, so you're telling us that the only way Americans are going to get to the airport is if the Taliban let them through. That's what you're telling us, that the Taliban is a single point of failure for this mission.
Had Donald Trump won re-election, would this have been the same game plan? Would this all have happened in the same way? Do you?
My criticism would have been the same if this would have happened.
But do you think it would have happened, or there's no way to know?
No, I don't, because the Biden-Obama approach was always to pay our enemies, to give them money, to give them incentives, to use the threat of sanctions if they don't do something, or try to shame them into, you need to pay attention because the international community could condemn what you're doing. The Trump policy was, Qasem Soleimani killed an American in Iraq. His name was Narwaz Ahmed. He was an Iraqi American. He died on December 27th, 2019, and Soleimani died on January 2nd, 2020. That was a Trump policy. That's what Trump told the Taliban. As we draw down, if you do anything to any of our people or any of our Afghan SIVs, we will do this. And before the negotiation started, he said, do you understand that? And
Trump did surrender, you would say.
What's that?
Did you say Trump surrendered, though, to the Taliban prior to this?
Trump made a deal. Trump made a deal. I don't know that it's surrendering.
McMaster felt that Mike Pompeo surrendered in March of 2020. Do you agree with that or disagree? Or
I respect General McMaster. I worked for General McMaster when he was Colonel McMaster. McMaster knows and cares about this issue. We all do. What I saw with the Trump negotiations with the Taliban, I thought was going to fail. The only ask of the Taliban was disassociate yourselves from Al Qaeda, which they haven't done, and don't kill an American on our way out. They haven't killed an American service member, is what they said. Don't kill an American soldier on our way out. They haven't killed an American yet, but they will kill a lesser American. And what I mean by a lesser American is State Department ranks Americans. govies, military, contractors, dual citizens, and these Afghan SIV holders as future Americans, right? And we communicated to our enemies that you can take a contractor, you can take a dual national, you can do these things, they can hold them hostage, and you can use them for concessions, for sanctions relief, for payouts, for pallets of cash. And I expect that to be the best case scenario for this whole operation.
Yeah. Wow. Best case scenario indeed. So do you think that there's a chance in 2 years we end up going back in there with another force and kind of replaying a lot of this over again? Or do you think Afghanistan is in the past for America now?
I think I'm not an advocate. I was never an advocate for staying as long as we did without a winning strategy. We haven't had a winning strategy since 2010. Maybe not
Can
even.
you bring General Petraeus back in, my hero?
What's that?
Can we bring my hero, General Petraeus, back in?
I mean, General Petraeus got it right during the surge. I worked with General Petraeus. I worked with Odierno. 2007, 2008 were the right thing to do in Iraq. And when Petraeus went to Afghanistan, he had his hands tied. Remember, that's when Obama announced a surge and announced when it would end. As soon as you tell the enemy that you're going to surge forces and within 18 months you're going to be gone, the enemy just waits you out. And that's what happened. Petraeus had his hands tied, McChrystal had his hands tied, and we're back to, I would argue that even during the Trump administration, they had their hands tied. But there was always the threat that we will annihilate you if you do something, if you kill an American. And the Biden exit was the right exit. Again, I'm not an advocate for staying in Afghanistan without a winning strategy. But we could have stayed in Afghanistan.
Michael, why isn't we could nation build in Asia, but we couldn't nation build in?
Just go there, exactly. Why are we able to do it in Germany? Why are we able to do it in South Korea? Why are we able to do it in Japan? Why are we able to do it? Because we had resolve and commitment to defeat and kill the enemy to the point where we actually had primacy. We never had primacy in Iraq. We had primacy in the number of forces. We never had primacy in the willingness of our politicians to stay and keep it and evolve it into something else.
Yes.
And now we're back in Iraq, right? We went back to Iraq after leaving in 2011.
Saying that there's a desire for quitting, and that's been the difference.
I argue that I don't think democracies can win wars anymore because, unless you win it within the first 2 years when you have that political capital of just getting into office, because we're in election cycles every 2 years. We may or may not change out the commander in chief every 4 years. And we just change the strategies. Afghanistan is that. We basically fielded 20 different teams with 20 different strategies over 20 years. And the same team just stayed on the ground watching, learning, developing a playbook. And then we gave that team an off season. We allowed it to go to a training camp in Pakistan during the wintertime, refit, rearm, regroup, and then re-enter Afghanistan and go tear apart everything we built that year.
Well, many people feel that the Taliban is just a proxy for the Pakistanis. So do you see issues with India occurring between the border there?
Yeah, I mean, the Pakistani intelligence service has always looked at the Taliban as a weapon that they can use against India, as something they could cultivate to be able to use it at some point. You have Pakistani Taliban, you have the Haqqani network, you have this 30-kilometer buffer zone inside of Pakistan that the government can't control, where all of these terrorist groups just hang out, and we don't target them. We don't target them in this area, and we should. And it is going to reintroduce Americans. Your question was, do you see Americans back in 2 years? I see Americans having to stay because we'll continue to conduct airstrikes. We'll continue to embed with the resistance. We'll continue to cultivate relationships with the resistance. So the resistance were allies 2 weeks ago, and now they don't trust us. So that is going to reintroduce. We have recent examples of betrayal in Syria, where we abandoned the Kurds, in Iraq, where we abandoned the Sunnis and the Kurds, and now we're abandoning the Shia protesters. And now with our allies in Afghanistan for 20 years, our enemies are telling their enemies, you can't count on the US, they're not going to be there for you. And that's why Taiwan is worried. That's why Iraq is worried. That's why the Middle East is worried. Israel
Every
is
Chinese
worried.
friend of mine says that Taiwan will be taken by China in the next 5 to 10 years. Do you agree with them?
I think our adversaries are going to do all they can over the next 3.5 years because they see weakness. Our adversaries watched the Biden administration in Vienna cave to Iran on behalf of Russia and China. And our adversaries just saw the United States collapse in Afghanistan. They're going to get all they can.
Sun Tzu is very wise. I agree with you. And Clausewitz also wise. War can only be fought absolutely. We can't go in half-cocked as we've been trying to do. Such an embarrassing time to be an American right now.
It is. Our adversaries don't go into these countries to fix the whole thing. We do. We go in hoping to fix everything because we're Americans. We're on your side, right?
Yeah.
The Russians and the Chinese go in and say, okay, this is where the resources are. These are the people in charge of the resources. So those are the only people we're going to deal with. This is the airfield we want. We're going to take this airfield. This is the port we want. We're going to take this port. The US goes in and says, we're not here for any of your resources. Russia and China go in to get the resources. And the US tries to broker peace among all these groups that are at each other's throats. And it just ends up miring American combat forces for 17 years in Iraq, 20 years in Afghanistan.
Without a doubt, George Washington is probably rolling over in his grave right now. But America has had dark times before, obviously with both Saigon and when we pulled out of Iran. Weakness will be exploited, but hopefully it will give way to strength in leadership eventually, moving forward. I'm a very proud American. I love America, and George Washington absolutely is with General Petraeus and General Patton, three of my great heroes. So hopefully, I would like General Petraeus to run for president. I hope he will consider it soon. I would devote everything I have to helping him. He's such a great American. We need great Americans at this time. And America did build the greatest country. And so I do believe in it. And I do believe we will get past this. But no, this was a terribly dark time. I mean, is there anyone around the world that doesn't have less respect for us than they did a week ago, or doesn't trust us less than they did a week ago, from Venezuela to Portugal?
I think our allies, I mean, you see that British member of parliament, what he said. He was a veteran of the Afghan war, and he was almost near tears at the abandonment of an ally. The abandonment, and then actually saying that the ally wasn't willing to fight when the Afghan National Army lost 60,000 fighting the Taliban. Again, it's easier to fight if there's an American next to you.
Of course, people forget that the army's been fighting for quite a while now, lost quite a number of people. They've been abandoned by the Americans. They've been approached by the Taliban. They've been paid off by the Taliban, and they don't see support. They see money and potential death. So it's almost an easy situation. And all of a sudden,
and we put them in that situation. Sorry, go ahead.
No, the house of cards falls quickly.
Yes, the Saigon, right? We heard the Biden administration officials prior to this all going to hell saying, "Oh, this is nothing like Saigon. This is not our Saigon moment." It's worse.
Yes, it is worse. Much worse. We did not have 15 to 20,000 American citizens inside of Saigon, when that last helicopter went up. At that point, it was, friends and family and friends and friends of family. I mean,
right.
It was,
and the caveated language, we're here to get those Americans that want to get out. What Americans don't want to get out of Afghanistan right now? Or we told them to come and they chose not to. You see that California congressman who said that we should not be sending Americans out to go get Americans who didn't listen to State Department warnings to get out of Afghanistan. We don't say things like that. Your heroes wouldn't say something like that.
No.
This is coming out of the Biden administration. This is coming out of the Biden administration. It is pathetic. And it's an embarrassment, and it's an affront, and they fall out behind the troops. God bless our troops. And Millie yesterday saying, we have to. Our troops are out there; they deserve our respect, and we were proud of them. Their leadership, the troops' leadership, have failed them. Yes to all those things. Those Americans out there are doing all the right things. The people that let 600 Afghans on that plane, those pilots, those crew chiefs, those are great Americans. This administration might punish them for doing that, for violating a regulation when they actually save lives.
Oh.
This administration is failing the soldiers.
But it
if
goes
they
across party lines. I mean, Harry S. Truman would not have acted this way. I can't believe that. After reading his biography, to me, he was a brave man.
I think only Biden could act this way. I mean, we're hearing from Susan Rice whispering here in DC.
I mean, you talk about Trump's bombing. Harry Truman is the man that bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki to ensure American safety.
Right.
That's what leaders do. They ensure their citizens' safety. That is the point of the state. As Alexander Hamilton said, the point of the state is to ensure its citizens' protection and safety.
Exactly. And we have 10 to 15,000 Americans that are doubting that commitment, that are doubting that resolve from their government based on what they're hearing from the commander in chief, who's absent. I mean,
will China go in, by the way, do you think, into Afghanistan?
For the resources, absolutely. Yeah, they've already brokered these deals. So China's not closing its embassy. Russia's not closing.
They'll just go to the Taliban and say, hey, here's a few $1 million. We want that medal. And you can have some of it too.
The Qataris are already doing that. The Qataris, the Chinese,
Gotcha.
the Russians are already paying the Taliban to do all these things.
And the 164 million that the president took and apparently left 40 million on the tarmac, I assume those for the Russian agents that got him safely to the tarmac. Would that sound about right? Did he take that from the budget? Was that his money, do you think? Or do you think he just took that from the government?
Well, there's no accountability. So we don't have eyes and ears.
There's just no way to know.
And everything's cash payment because you don't want to put it in the banks because then the banks aren't secured and somebody can go in there and actually, I'm not talking about secured as in electronically.
No, I understand.
I'm talking about going in and getting that stuff.
Basic security.
So, he supposedly went to the valley to meet with the resistance, the new resistance. And if he had $167 million, then hopefully that's what it's going to. I doubt it.
Oh, probably going to Mercedes Benzes to drive around.
He should be arrested by Interpol.
I agree with you. He should be arrested by Interpol. It does seem, it does seem like he just absolutely took 100. Otherwise, how would he achieve 165 million in assets as the president of a nation with, barely 10 billion in foreign reserves? I don't know how many of those foreign reserves came across because America gave it to them too, but
billions of dollars have disappeared the same way in Iraq and Afghanistan. Cash.
So you don't see there's no strategic motive to anything you saw here. This was just plain cowardly running out.
If our mission was to keep Afghanistan from falling back into the hands of the Taliban, and we just gave the country back to the Taliban.
How expensive would it have been to turn Kabul into a Guantanamo Bay?
Yeah, going back to that, when I first got to Afghanistan in 2002, I was supposed to be the detention facility OIC, officer in charge. Thank God I didn't get that job because the person that got it was relieved from command after one of the detainees was, died in captivity. But those Al-Qaeda high-value targets and Taliban high-value targets that were kept at that detention facility in Bagram Air Base have all been released. They are on the streets now. They are the ones exacting revenge. They are the ones that are cutting translators' heads off at checkpoints. They are the Taliban. They are not these people on camera. They're not the people in Qatar saying that this is a new Taliban. They're not the ones trying to win over Christiana Amanpour, if you saw her interview with the Taliban, asking them, hey, when will the moderate Taliban, emerge? Yeah. It is a sad day when a terrorist group can actually use our media as a PR platform while its fighters on the ground are killing Afghans and extorting Afghans and plan to take American hostages.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to have a Mogadishu moment. We have to go out and get our guys. We have to go out and get our Americans.
Doesn't it seem far worse than Mogadishu, though?
Well, it doesn't have to be. The U.S. says, hey, listen, Taliban, you guys got to clear out. Any Taliban fighter on the street is going to be a target. You've got 10 hours to get out.
They'll get out.
10 hours to get out of Kabul, or we're going to take out this site, this site, this site, this leader, that leader. We should have a special operations mission to go capture Taliban leadership, a couple guys, and say, okay, we're going to hold them until all of our Americans are out, and then you'll get them back.
Yeah.
Something like that. We have to communicate a threat to the Taliban, clear out of Kabul, and let us get our people out. Now, having said that, a city of 4.5 million people that all want to get out of that city, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. I mean, the most important thing is to get the Americans out.
It reminds me of Constantinople, frankly.
Yeah, it's with 24/7 news media.
With
And
24/7
the enemy have a PR platform. Yep, it's
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yep.
And you have, like the Sultan, you have anyway, this was a fantastic conversation, Michael. You're a brilliant,
thanks for having me. I appreciate the
brilliant wealth
opportunity.
of knowledge. And, I really appreciate you coming on and.
Anytime. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Anytime.
Michael. Be well. Thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.